Where are we in the Gemara? We're holding on the bottom, towards the bottom of Daf Chalamet Vav Amud Beis, where it says Chavitz Kedeira. About 10 lines from the bottom. The first word is Ha B'Yabeshta. Chavitz Kedeira. Got it? Okay. So Chavitz Kedeira is some kind of a mixture that you cook in a pot. It's called chavitz because it becomes congealed. That's what the word chavitz means. And Rashi here says that it's some kind of a mixture of flour, oil, and honey. So the question is, what bracha do you make on this mixture? Chavitz kedeira, the chen daisa, and the same is also daisa, which is some kind of a porridge. Right? You take grain and you cut it up and you mix it in a pot with water. Rav Yehuda says in both of these cases, shahakal niya b'dvarei. The bracha will be shahakal. Rav Kahana says, bayre mine mezainis. In both of these cases, the bracha is bayre mine mezainis. So the Gemara will explain, why would you make a shahakal on this? But daisa, if it's a case of daisa, which is wheat grits in a pot that cooked, greida just alone, everybody will agree that the bracha is bayra mina mezainis. It's that's the bracha that you make on porridge. So let me just clarify. We're going to see soon in the Gemara when it comes to using kernels. So you have three options. You could either eat the kernels raw as is. The Gemara calls that kaisis chita. You chew the kernels of wheat as is. That's going to be a bayra priyadama. You could then either take it and make it into flour and turn it into a bread. That's going to be a maitzi lechem and aretz. And here you have the case where the wheat is pounded and it's been made into a porridge, and then the bracha is going to be bayre mina mezainis. Okay, because it's not a maitzi, it's not bread, but it still satisfies a person enough that it deserves this special bracha of bayre mina mezainis, that it satisfies a person. Ki pligi, when is the argument here? Bedaisa ke'en chavitz kedeira. When the daisa is made similar to chavitz kedeira, and what's unique about this chavitz kedeira is that it has a lot of honey in it, and the honey and the oil is more than the wheat that's in it. So therefore, the question is, because it has much less wheat in it, so therefore the bracha maybe would be shahakal, going according to the majority. So in that case, Rav Yehuda says shahakal. Kasava duf sheikir. He says the honey in this mixture is the main thing. Rav Kahana says the bracha still will be bayre mina mezainis. Savar, his opinion is smida iker. Smida is the flour. The flour or the honey, the wheat grits, that's the main thing of this pot, this is what you cook there, and therefore the bracha will still be mezainis. Rav Yosef said, Kavaseh de Rav Kahana mistavra. It makes sense to follow the opinion of Rav Kahana. Why? The Rav Shmuel damri tarvayu. Rav and Shmuel both said, and here they're going to present a very important rule regarding anytime you have any ingredients of mezainis that's mixed into any mixture. Kol sheyesh by mechameishes haminin. Anytime you have mixed into the ingredients from the 5 grains, right? Wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. Anytime you have that mixed in, mevarchen alav bayre mina mezainis, the bracha will be bayre mina mezainis, even if they're in the minority, even if the main ingredients are other things, but because of the chshivas of these grains that give a person, that satisfy a person, you always make the bracha bayre mina mezainis, and this is a very important thing to remember la halacha, that once you have them mixed in, the bracha is going to be mezainis. Guf, the Gemara now goes and brings back this din itself, and the Gemara is going to start off with the 5 grains, but we're very quickly going to enter into the sugya of rice. Much of the next plot is going to be all about the halacha of the bracha on rice, the bracha b'shayna and the bracha achreina, as we'll see. Rav and Shmuel damri tarvayu. Rav and Shmuel both said, Kol sheyesh by mechameishes haminin. Anything that has in it from the 5 grains, mevarchen alav bayre mina mezainis. The bracha will be bayre mina mezainis. Vit manami, and we also learned another statement very similar. Rav Shmuel damri tarvayu. Rav and Shmuel both said, Kol shahu mechameshes haminin. Anything that it is from the 5 grains, mevarchen alav bayre mina mezainis. You make the bracha bayre mina mezainis. It seems to be a repetition, right? Mm-hmm. The first one it said kol sheyesh boy. It has in it. And the second one it says kol shahu, whatever is. So what's the difference? So the Gemara explains. At Tzricha, we need both of these statements. The iyashmin and kol shahu, if I would only use the expression whatever is from the 5 grains, hava min mishum diisibeinei, because it's when you see the 5 grains, you see it openly, clearly. It's there separately. So therefore you make a bracha by the minim mezainis. Aval al yedei taruvis, what's if the 5 grains are mixed into other ingredients and you don't see it? So then, maybe I would think then, you don't make the bracha of by the minim mezainis. You have the other ingredients that are covering it. Kamash malan, so therefore he said, kol sheyesh boy. When you have a dish that has the ingredients of the 5 grains and it's mixed into it, yesh boy, you make the bracha of by the minim mezainis. If we would say that whatever has in it the ingredients of the 5 grains, that you make the bracha mezainis, havamina, I would think to say kol sheyesh boy chamesh saminin in. If it's mixed in from the 5 grains, so then you make the bracha by the minim mezainis. Aval, now what you could deduce from that is oires v'deichen. If you have mixed into the ingredients rice or millet, loy, so then you don't make the bracha of bayra minim mezainis. But then I would think, you know why you don't make a bracha of bayra minim mezainis on the rice and the millet? Mishum dal yedei taruvas, because it's mixed into the ingredients. Aval, I would think, ise be'einei. How about if you're eating rice separately? If you have ingredients, if you're cooking in a pot, just rice itself. Neime, or you see the rice separately. So then neime, maybe I would say, maybe on rice and millet, you also make the bracha of bayra minim mezainis. Kamash malan, therefore Rav and Shmuel, in their second statement, was saying something totally different. Kol shahu mechameshes haminin, only if it's from the 5 grains, hu de mevarchan alav bayra minim mezainis. Then you make the bracha of bayra minim mezainis. La afuke oires v'deichen, which comes to exclude rice and millet, da afila isa be'inei, even if you cook it in a pot separately, loy mevarchinon bayra minim mezainis, you do not make the bracha of bayra minim mezainis. Which bracha do you make on it? Shahakal niyeh b'dvarei, as we'll see soon. Actually, it's either shahakal or maybe hadama. Okay, but you do not make the bracha of bayra minim mezainis.
What's the hakal that you would make?
So we'll discuss that. Let's see the Hamshul the Gemara. So now the Gemara will get more into understanding over here. What's the story with rice? So we just concluded that Rav and Shmuel came to teach us that on rice and millet you do not make the bracha bayra minim mezainis. So now the Gemara questions this. So rice and millet, loy mevarchinon bayra minim mezainis. Is that true? Do you not make the bracha of bayra minim mezainis? Tanya, but we learned in a braise hiviul one of pas ayres u pas deichen. If you have in front of you bread made out of rice bread or millet bread. Mevarach alav tchila v'sayv kemaisa kedeira. The bracha that you make on it before you eat it and after you eat it is like maisa kedeira. What's maisa kedeira? Going back to what we said before, porridge, which is a mezainis and ala michya. So it's comparing. It seems to be comparing rice and millet to eating a mezainis. V'gabe ma'isa kedera Tanya. Regarding ma'isa kedera, we learned in a brayse betchila mevarach alav bayra minim mezainis. Before you make the bracha bayra minim mezainis, a l'b'soif mevarach alav bracha achas mein shalosh. You make the bracha that's called me'ein shalosh, which is al hamichya. So this seems to be very clear that on rice you do make a bayra minim mezainis and you do make al hamichya. So the Gemara answers, no, that's not what the Tana of the brayse meant. Kemaisa kedera, he's comparing it to porridge, but v'loy kemaisa kedera. It's not completely compared to porridge. Kemaisa kedera, the mevarchan alav tchila v'sayf. It's compared to porridge that you make a bracha on it before you eat it and after you eat it. But v'loy kemaisa kedera, it's not compared to porridge. The ilu b'maisa kedera, b'tchila mevarach bayra minim mezainis, l'b'sayf mevarach achas mein gimel. You make the bracha bayra minim mezainis and then you make the bracha ala michya. But vilohacha, when it comes to bread that's made out of rice or millet, first you make the bracha before you eat it. The bracha is shahakol. After you finished eating, you make the bracha of bayra nefashes, not bayra minim mezainis, not ala michya. So the Gemara goes back to what Rav and Shmuel said before, that you do not make a bracha mezainis or ala michya on it. So this is, by the way, the first time, possibly maybe even the only time, that the Gemara quotes this bracha of bayra nefashis rabbis. The nusach of this bracha. Over here, it's interesting because the nusach of our bracha is slightly different. The Gemara stops by bara, and we say barasa, and we continue lahachis b'em nefesh kol chai. But the Gemara, I don't believe the Gemara brings ever that nusach of lahachis b'em nefesh kol chai. The taich of the bracha, by the way, is, Taisus over here says, bayra nefashis rabbis, the Eibusha creates all the nefashis, all the people in the world, v'chesrainan, and he provides their needs. Okay, and that's like that, the Taisus says, that refers to bread, and water, the basic needs that a person needs. And then Al Kol Ma Shebarasa Lachis B'Nefesh Kachai, we continue Lachis B'Nefesh Kachai refers to those additional delicacies that you can eat, fruits and all kinds of things that add a person pleasure, not the bare necessities that he needs to survive. That's the taich of the bracha according to Taisvis and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. This is the first pshat he brings there, that the bracha we say two different things: the basics, the necessities, and the things that give us pleasure. Okay. What would be the chiddush? Why would I think that you don't make a bracha? It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. But the Gemara continues to question this case of oires. We're not done yet. The Gemara says, wait a minute. Oires lav ma'isa kederu. Does oires not have the din exactly like ma'isa kederu? And the bracha would be mezainis and alamichya. But Tanya, we learned clearly in a brayso that says as follows: Eilu hein ma'isa kedera. These are the categories that fall in the category of ma'isa kedera porridge. And here it talks about wheat grits that are cut up into different parts. The kernel is cut up. Chilka, when it's sliced into halves.
How do you say the porridge in Yiddish?
I will have to help him out. How do you say porridge in Yiddish?
Porridge.
Huh?
Porridge.
Okay. Oatmeal. Okay, oatmeal. That's today. Okay.
Akasha?
Yeah, akasha. Yeah. Chilka, when it's sliced into halves. Tirgis is when it's sliced into thirds. Soiles is flour. Okay, the Bach actually takes this out because it doesn't really flow here in the Braisa. Zoriz is when it's sliced into quarters. Arsan is sliced into fifths. Oires it's sliced into sixth parts. I believe that's the chilka. Each, in other words, or maybe a fourth into fifths. You take the kernel and you slice it into smaller pieces, and then you cook it with water. That's a porridge, and on all of these you make a mezainis, and then it adds the oires, and rice also falls into this category. So you clearly see that rice is part of this category where you make a mezainis. And for the Gemara, Hamani Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. This brayso follows the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, which had a unique opinion about rice. The Tanya, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, oires min doganhu. Oires is actually a kind of grain. It has the same din as the other 5 grains. So much so that on Pesach, if you have rice that became chametz, that you allow it to become chametz, you'll be chayav kares if you eat it. If you make matzah, rice matzah, you yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. This is his opinion. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's opinion was it's not just the 5 grains. Rice is another grain that could be used as matzah, you chayav chametz on it, and therefore the bracha on it would be a maitzi lechem in haaretz. That's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. So he has an extreme opinion. According to him, oires in that brayso is part of the other grains that you make in it a bracha of mezainis. Aber Rabbanan disagree. Rabbanan say that it's not one of the 5 grains, and therefore the bracha is going to be shahakal. Okay. But the Gemara goes back and says, wait a minute, we can prove that even according to the Rabbanon, you would make a bracha mezainis on rice. The Rabbanon loy, and according to the Rabbanon, would you not make a mezainis on rice? Well, Tanya, we learned in another brayso, hakaisis esachita, person that chews the kernel as is, the full kernel, he's chewing, then eating the kernel of wheat, mevarach ala bayre pri adama. As I said before, then you make the bracha of bayre pri adama. How about tochna afa? You take the wheat and you grind it in the flour, and then you make bread out of it and you bake it. Baru bishla. Then you took this bread and you baked it in water, and you cooked it in water. That is. So now the question is: after you bake it in water, cook it in water, does it still retain its status of bread that you make the bracha of hamaitzi? So the brayso says, "Bizman shapruses kayamais." If the pieces of bread are still there, you can see the pieces of bread in the water. Then you make the bracha hamaitzi. But gimel brachas, and when you finish eating, you have to bench the 3 brachas, the main 3 brachas of benching, and the rest of benching that chachamim were misakin. So, but if you put and you bake you cook the bread and water, that is, and you don't see the pieces of bread anymore. So then now the bracha is going to be mezainis. And after you eat, the bracha is going to be ala mechya. Okay, that's the first half of the brayso. This Gemara is going to quote this again later, so keep this in mind. But this is the first part regarding bread that comes from the grains. Now we come to rice, which is relevant for us. Hakaisa says ha'oires. If a person is chewing rice, mevarach alav bayre pri adama. So then the bracha is bayre pri adama, like in the case of when you choose a full kernel of wheat. Tachnoi afa yebishloi. How about the same thing? You took it, you ground it into a flour, and then you baked it into rice bread. But then you took it and you cooked it in water. Afal pisha prusis kayamais. Even if you still see pieces of this rice bread in the water, betchilam avarach alav bayre minim mezaynes. Before you eat it, the bracha will be bayre minim mezaynes. Or lebesayif. After you finish eating, mevarach alav bracha achas me'ein shalosh. After you finish eating, the bracha is going to be ala michya. So here it's saying clearly that on rice you make a bracha bayre minim mezaynes and ala michya. So the Gemara now will explain this brayso cannot be following Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's opinion. Why not? Mani, whose opinion is this? If this is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, the Amar Eides min Dagan, his opinion is that rice is a kind of grain. So you should have to make the bracha b'shalish brachos, and when you've finished eating it, you should have to bench the regular benching. That's what you should have to make the bracha. So this cannot be Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Elo lav. Rather, we're going to have to say Rabbanan. That this brayso is the opinion of the Rabbanan that say that rice is not one of the grains. And still he says you make a bracha of bayre minim mezaynes. So here the Rishonim explain what's taka the reason. If it's not one of the 5 grains, so why don't you make it a bracha shahakal or adama? The answer is because rice bread still satisfies a person similar to what grain does. Because it satisfies a person in a similar way, it deserves a special bracha of bayre minim mezaynes. So basically, regarding rice, there could be 3 opinions about this. Either you could say the bracha should be shahakal, because it does not satisfy the person the same way grain does, and it's not a grain. So the bracha is shahakal. Or if you eat it whole, the bracha would be shahakal if the rice is not whole. If it's not the way, if you eat it whole, like when you eat kernels whole, then the bracha would be adama. Or the bracha should be hamaitzi, actually, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because it's mamish one of the grains. Or the bracha should be mezaynes, because even though it's not one of the grains, but still it satisfies a person similar to grains, so it deserves a bracha of mezaynes. But over here we see in the brayso that it says that the bracha is mezaynes, and this is certainly not Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's opinion. So the Gemara concludes, or to Yufte, the Rav Shmuel, this refutes what Rav and Shmuel, that is, the Rav and Shmuel, that they say that the bracha is shahakal to Yufte. This refutes their opinion, and therefore the halacha remains and should remain that for rice you make a bracha mezaynes. And according to many Rishonim, it's simple and clear. The bracha of rice is mezaynes. But here's the problem. Taisus over here says that it's unclear exactly what's rice. And the Gemara here started off, if you noticed what happened, the Gemara started off talking about oides and daichin, which is rice and millet. Then later on, when it just brought this brayso over here that proves that oides is mezaynes, it didn't say daichin. It only spoke about rice and not millet. So this, when we refuted Rav and Shmuel's opinion, that was only regarding rice, not regarding millet. And Taisus over here says that there's a question, what's rice and what's millet? What's oides and what daichin? So now we don't know regarding what we refuted the opinion. Did we refute their opinion regarding rice or millet? So therefore comes out the big problem over here regarding rice. What is the bracha? Is the bracha going to be mezaynes, like we've just concluded? Is the bracha going to be shahakal, because when you cook it in a pot, the rice breaks apart. It's not anymore whole rice, and therefore the bracha has to be shahakal. Or maybe the bracha is going to be adama, because when you cook it in the pot, if you don't cook it enough, so then each rice is itself, there's the full rice separately, and maybe the bracha should even be adama. As we'll see later in the Gemara, it depends how it's cooked, depends how sticky it is, and so on. So therefore, there's 3 options of what bracha to make on rice, and therefore the Alter Rebbe is machmir and say the Brachos and says that one should, Yirei Shemayim, should only eat rice. Yirei Shemayim, the lashon there is that a person should make the bracha only in the middle of a suda. I believe you can look it up again. That you should eat it only in a suda, and if the Alter Rebbe says if you're not eating it in a suda, then the bracha should be shahakal ne'ebedvarei. That's the conclusion of the sugya here. The Alter Rebbe doesn't bring it. There are some rabbanim that say you can make 3 brachas. Some rabbanim say not. But I'm just telling you what it says in the Seder Brachos Hanenan.
What about sushi?
Sushi's rice. It's the same shiloh. It's the same
shiloh.
That's a different question already. When you get to the tafel.
In sushi
Okay, that goof is a shiloh, but the rice in itself is a very big problem.
We should have stayed in the rice and the sushi is the main thing.
Sagt the Gemara weiter, oh mama. The Gemara now temporarily goes back to something that we brought before, and then it's going to return to rice. Oh mama, before we learned in the brayso, hakaisis asachita, one that chews the full grain, the full kernel of wheat, mevarach aleh bayre pri adama. The bracha that you make is bayre pri adama. Fragt the Gemara, Vatanya, we learned in a different brayse, Beire Mine Zroim, that the Eibush created types of seeds, not the bracha of Beire Pri Adama. So the Gemara answers, Loi Kashi, it's not a contradiction. Ha Rabbi Yehuda va Rabbanon. The brayse before was the Rabbanon, and this brayse that says Mine Zroim is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tnan, as we learned in our mission in the beginning of the Peirik, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Val Yerakis Uwaime Beire Pri Adama. So the Tanakama actually, the Rabbanon said that on vegetables you make the bracha of Beire Pri Adama. But Rabbi Yehuda says, Beire Mine Deshoyim. When you eat greens, green leaves, leafy things, and that you make, the Eibush created all types of herbage, like when you eat lettuce and these kinds of things. So as we'll see later in the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is you have to have a more individual, specific bracha for the different kinds of things that grow, and therefore he held regarding a person that eats the full kernels of wheat, you make the bracha that the Eibush created, the kernels, the zroyim, the seeds. But we don't follow that opinion, you make the bracha Beire Pri Adama. Okay, now the Gemara comes back to the Eiris. Omamar, we learned before that Hakaisis is a Eiris, if one is chewing rice, Mevarach alav Beire Pri Adama, so then the bracha is Beire Pri Adama. Tachnoi afayu bishloi, how about if you ground it? And you made it into a bread, rice bread. Then ubishloi, and then you cooked it, afal pisha prusis kayamas. Even if the pieces of the rice bread are still there in the water, betchilam Mevarach alav Beire Minim Zainis. So before you eat it, you make a Beire Minim Zainis, a l'besoif, bracha achas mein shalish. But then, after you eat the rice bread, you make a bracha ala michya. So the Gemara now is going to focus on the bracha that you make after you eat. The bracha of ala michya that it says here. Do we actually make an ala michya after you eat rice? So the Gemara asks, Tanya, but we learned in another brayse, l'besoif, v'loi klum. After you eat the rice bread, v'loi klum, you don't make any bracha. Rashi here explains, when it says v'loi klum, it doesn't mean you don't make any bracha. It means it doesn't require the special bracha of ala michya. You make the more generic bracha of beire nefashos. That's what it means. So the contradiction is, which bracha do you make after you eat rice bread? Do you make the bracha ala michya, or do you make beire nefashos? Rav Sheshes answers like Kashya, this is not a contradiction. Harav Gamliel, Harabana. One brayse is Rav Gamliel, and another brayse is Rabbanon. Now the Gemara will quote a long brayse about this argument of Rav Gamliel and Rabbanon, and only the second half of this brayse will be relevant to what we're speaking about over here. But let's see the whole brayse. The Tanya we learned in a brayse, Zeh Klal, this is the rule. Kol Shemishivas Aminin, if you're eating anything from the 7 special species that are grown in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is Shalosh Brachos. After you eat them, you have to bench the regular benching of 3 brachos. Chachamim say, like we do, bracha achas mein shalosh. You make a bracha al ha'etz, not the full benching. The Gemara shares, the Brayse shares an incident that happened. Rabbi Gamliel and the other elders were sitting at a meal and a top floor in the city of Yerichai. And they brought a date to eat, which is of course one of the 7 minim of Eretz Yisrael. And they ate. And Rabbi Gamliel gave permission for Rabbi Akiva to bench, as it was in those times, they benched and they would might see others. So he gave permission to Rabbi Akiva to bench. Rabbi Akiva jumped and he benched, and he didn't bench the full benching like it was the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, which gave him the permission to bench. He benched the bracha of ala eitz. Ala eitz. Rabbi Gamliel said to him, Akiva, until when do you enter your head into this argument between myself and the other chachamim? If I'm giving you to bench, he was telling him you should bench like my opinion and bench the full benching. Amalei, said Rabbi Akiva, answered him, Rabbeinu, my teacher, even though this is your opinion, and your friends say this as well, but Rabbeinu, you, Rabbi Gamliel, have taught us Yachid v'Rabim halacha k'Rabim. If there's a Yachid, and you are the Yachid, and the Rabbanon that disagree with you are the Rabbim, on the majority opinion, we pass like the Rabbim. So I'm sorry, even if you gave me the schus to bench and it's in your presence, but I'm going to pass like the Rabbim, and I'm going to bench ala eitz. This is the end of the story here. Not Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Gamliel. So first we start off with the same point of the Shivas Aminim, and then we'll come to rice. Kol Shum Shivas Aminim. Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is, anytime it's something which is from the 7 special species of Eretz Yisrael, and v'loi min daganhu, and even if it's not from one of the grains, Oy min dagan, or if it's one of the grains, v'lo yasei pas, even if it wasn't made into bread. Rabbi Gamliel loy mishalosh brachos. Rabbi Gamliel says in all these cases, you have to bench the full benching. Chachamim ma'imrim, the Chachamim's opinion is bracha achas. You only make one bracha, as we said before, the bracha ala eitz or the bracha ala michya. Kol she'ein loy mishivas aminim v'loy min dagan. Now we come to rice. This is what's relevant for us. If you're eating something which is not from the Shivas Aminim, and it's not from any other grains, but what is it? Pas if you're eating rice bread or millet bread. Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is bracha achas mein shalosh. So over here, the bracha is going to be ala michya. The Chachamim's opinion is v'loi klum. You don't make the bracha ala michya. What does v'loi klum mean? Not nothing, but it means bayar nefashos. Okay, so right here we see clearly that Rabbi Gamliel and the Rabbanan argued about the bracha achrayna on rice or rice bread. So therefore the contradiction of the Braisa before, one is the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel and one is the opinion of the Rabbanan. But the Gemara will not accept this pshat. The Gemara says, wait a minute. That Braisa where it said that you make an ala michya on rice bread, and we said that that's Rabbi Gamliel. It cannot be Rabbi Gamliel. Let's go back to the beginning of that Braisa. B'maya kimte, how did you establish that Braisa ke Rabbi Gamliel? That it follows Rabbi Gamliel's opinion? Emes Sefer Dereisha. Let's look at the second half of the beginning of that Braisa, where it discusses bread made from the 5 grains. We quoted it before. What did it say there? What happens if you take bread and you cook it in water? If the pieces of bread are not there anymore, it's dissolved in the water. So then you make the bracha of Bayre Minim Mezainis, and when you finish eating, you make the bracha of Alamichya. So now the Gemara will analyze this. Could this be Rabbi Gamliel's opinion? When you have bread in water and it dissolved in the water, and you only make an alamichya, could Rabbi Gamliel hold such a thing? The Gemara says, Mani, who is this? Rabbi Gamliel, if you're going to say this is Rabbi Gamliel, how could that be? According to Rabbi Gamliel, if you're eating dates, or you're eating daisa, which is porridge, Rabbi Gamliel, Gimel Brachos, Rabbi Gamliel says you have to bench the full benching. If you had bread that you cooked in a pot, even if the bread dissolved in the water, of course Rabbi Gamliel would hold that you have to bench the full benching. So that Braisa cannot be following Rabbi Gamliel's opinion. Ela pshita Rabbanon. So it must be that Braisa is the Rabbanon's opinion. Iachi. So the Gemara asks, Kashya, the Rabbanon are the Rabbanon. So we have a contradiction now in the opinion of the Rabbanon. What bracha do you make after you eat rice or rice bread? Do you make an bayar nefashos or ala michya? Answers the Gemara, Rabbana. We must say that Braisa before is the Rabbanon, but we have to change what it says in the Braisa. But Tniga, by Oires, you're going to have to change it and say that by Oires, what's the bracha? Olu b'saif, ein mevarach ala v'loi klom. That after you eat Oires, you don't make the bracha ala michya, but you make the bracha of bayar nefashos rabbis. And that's the conclusion of the Gemara. And this is the halacha, that even if there's an argument of what bracha you make on rice, but you for sure only make a bayar nefashos on rice. Okay. Huh?
If she cooked or she baked, no?
No nafkamina. The bracha on rice is always bayar nefashos. It doesn't make a difference if it's made into a bread or you cook it in a pot, it's always bayar nefashos.
The erste bracha. The erste bracha, no?
Bayar nefashos. Here we're talking about the bracha achrayna. Bracha is bayar nefashos.
Plus kayomis, is that like kneidlach?
Is like, no, it's not kneidlach. Kneidlach has a different din. No, 1 second. There's a hemshich to this now, that's not kneidlach, no.
Means you cannot tell it.
1 second. The Gemara, it's a hemshich. To that point, that's the next piece of Gemara here. Omar Rava, so Rava said, Hi, Riyata the Chakloi. So first the Gemara comes back to Riyata. Riyata is the Chovitz Kedeira that was mentioned before, which is when you have a combination of water, honey, flour, and oil. Okay, so the chakloi, the way the villagers make it, the mafshi bekimcha, they make it very thick, and they put in a lot of flour. Mevarach bayre minim mezainis. So on that you make a bayre minim mezainis. My timer, what's the reason? The smida iker. The flour is the primary ingredient. The mechuzah, but the way it's made in the cities, the loy mafshi bekimcha, they don't put in so much flour. Mevarach alav shahakal niyeh bedvarei. So they make a bracha shahakal niyeh bedvarei. My timer, what's the reason? Duf sheikr. Because the way they make it, the honey is the main ingredient. But now we go back to what we learned already before. Again, we bring back the same rule, which is a very important rule. Rava said, no. Either way, the bracha remains a Baida Minim Mezainis, because the Rav and Shmuel, the Amri Tarvayu, Rav and Shmuel both said, Kol sheyeshpai mechameshes aminin, as long as it has ingredients in it of the 5 grains, the bracha is Baida Minim Mezainis, whether the 5 grains is the primary or the raiv of the ingredient or it's the minority. The 5 grains is so chashuv, it satisfies a person, and you always make the bracha Baida Minim Mezainis if it has that ingredient inside. There is an exception, as we'll see later in the Gemara. Sometimes you put grain, you put flour into the ingredients just in order to connect it, as a binder, exactly. Then you don't make the bracha Baida Minim Mezainis. But if it's part of the ingredients that gives a taste and adds to the food itself, so then the bracha is going to be Baida Minim Mezainis. Now we come back to the point that we spoke about before, when a person took bread and cooked it in water, and now there's pieces of bread inside. So we said before that if the pieces of the bread are still noticeable, so then you make a bracha hamaitzi, and if not, you make a bracha Baida Minim Mezainis. So according to Rashi's pshat, what the Gemara is about to talk about now is basically the same thing. Rav Yosef said, Hi, chavitza, the ispei pirurin. Chavitza is this type of something that's cooked in a pot with bread, and part of the ingredients is pieces of bread in it. So what bracha do you make? So if there has...
These are crumbs, pirurin crumbs.
True, but pirurin is not necessarily mamish crumbs. Look what the Gemara says. Kezayis, if those crumbs are the size of a kezayis, like an olive, so then betchilim mevarach alav hamaitzi lechem in aretz. If they're large enough, then yeah, they're like a kezayis. You make a bracha hamaitzi. Ulebesayif mevarach alav shalosh brachas. And then you make the bracha of benching. Second, the less bei perurin kezayis, but if those pieces of bread are in the water and they're smaller than a kezayis, betchila mevarach alav Baida Minim Mezainis, then you make the bracha of Baida Minim Mezainis, ulebesayif bracha achas mein shalish. And in the end, you make a bracha of ala michya. Let's finish the Gemara here. So the Gemara now will question this. Where did Rav Yosef take this shear to be mechalik, that it depends if those pirurin have the size of a kezayis or don't have the size of a kezayis? If you remember what it said in Amar Aleph, there it sounded more like if it dissolved. If it completely dissolved in the water and you don't see anymore any bread, you just see basically white water that's like white water from the bread, then you don't make a bracha hamaitzi. Right, over here it seems to be saying different, that it depends on if it's still the size of a kezayis or not. Where did Rav Yosef take this shear of a kezayis? So the Gemara says an interesting thing. He took it from what it says regarding the carbon mincha in the Beis HaMikdash. Amar Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef said, from where did I take this shear of a kezayis? The Tanya, it says in the Braise, a person is coming to bring a carbon mincha in Yerushalayim, and he hasn't brought a carbon mincha in a very long time. Oimer, the person says a bracha, Baruch shechiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu l'zman hazeh. He has to make a bracha that he has the opportunity to bring this carbon. Natlan la'achlan, you take it to eat it. The kainim are the ones that eat it. Mevarech hamaitzi lechem in aretz. They make the bracha of hamaitzi lechem in aretz. Now the Gemara over here will be discussing. There's various different kinds of karbanis mincha. Some of the karbanis mincha are brought just as flour and oil. That's it, and it's not cooked at all, not baked at all. But then you have the carbon mincha, which has to be fried in a pan, or deep fried in a deep pan. So then you have to take this flour and oil and mix it and deep fry it in a pan, which is basically the idea that we're talking about before, when you take a dough and instead of baking it, you cook it in deep fried in oil. So it was never baked as bread. Actually, it's being deep fried in oil. V'tani Allah, and what does it say on this? V'kulan paisasan kezayis, and you slice it up into small pieces of a kezayis. So you make the bracha hamaitzi lechem in aretz, but when could you make the bracha hamaitzi lechem in aretz? Only because it's sliced into pieces of a kezayis. So this is where Rav Yosef took it from. If it would have been less than a kezayis, you wouldn't make the bracha of hamaitzi lechem in aretz, because it's deep fried in oil, and if it's smaller than the size of a kezayis, it doesn't have the din of bread anymore. Amalei Abaye disagrees. Abaye says no. Ela meyata, if so, l'tana debei Rabbi Shmuel. According to the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel, the Amma, what did he say? Poirchan, you actually crumb it even further. Acha machzir on the sultan. You basically turn it into a meal. It's mamish like back into a flour. You don't break it up into pieces that are like a kezayis. You break it up mamish back into a flour. So hachanami deloi boy beruchi hamaitzi lechem and aretz. So you're going to say that according to him, you don't make the bracha of hamaitzi lechem and aretz because it's smaller than a kazayis. Right? That's what Rav Yosef said. Only if it's the size of a kazayis. So the Gemara says, now if you're going to argue and say hachanami, perhaps, yeah. This that it said before that you make only the bracha hamaitzi is only because it's the size of a kazayis. Not if you break it down further, smaller than a kazayis. But v'hatanya, we learned in another brayse, liket mikula and kazayis. If you gather from all these small little pieces that were less than a kazayis, and you gather the amount of a kazayis, v'achla, and then you ate it, im chametzu, if it's chametz, onish kares, you get kares for eating a kazayis of chametz. V'im matzahu, if it's matzah, adam yetze b'decha vasa b'pesach, you would be yetze yechiv in Pesach. Okay, that we're talking about over here. If if it's made matzah, right? If it's not made chametzik, so then you could be yaitz yichiv and Pesach. So if you get kares for chametz and you could be yaitz and matzah, that means that it's bread, right? Because it's in order to be yaitz the mitzvah of matzah, it has to be lechem oini, it has to be bread. So if it's bread, so you should be making the bracha of hamaitzi, even if you're combining a bunch of little pieces that are less than a kazayis. You're just eating the amount of a kazayis, but it's a bunch of little pieces that are less than a kazayis. So this contradicts what Rav Yosef said. Only if it's the pieces are the size of a kazayis do you make the bracha of hamaitzi. So the Gemara answers, he didn't just combine these little pieces and eat them. He took them and he attached them together. He attached them and he turned it back into a dough and he cooked it again, or he baked it again. He took this meal and he connected it together and baked it again. If so, what does it say in the end of that brayse? And that if he ate them, it uses a plural term. That he's only chayav kares if he ate them within the shear of kedei achilas pras, which is a certain part of a loaf of a bread, which is, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. There's different shiurim of kedei achilas pras. I think maybe even up to 8, 9 minutes. So the Gemara's question is, v'ibisha arson, if he took them and combined them together, hay sha'achlon, why does it use a plural term that he took these little pieces and ate them? Sha'achloi mibayale. You're saying that he turned it into a new dough, he turned it into a new piece of bread. It should have said sha'achloi in a singular term. So therefore we can't give this answer that Rav Yosef said that he turned it into a new piece of bread. So rather, Hacha b'mayaskina, Rav Yosef gives a different answer. Over there, you know what it's talking about? Beba milechem gadol. When you have a big piece of bread, and they have some little crumbs that are coming out of this big piece of bread. See, even if those little crumbs were cooked in a pot, and they are less than a kazayis, but if they come from a bigger piece of bread, and the bigger piece of bread is still there, so then, on the small pieces, you still make a bracha of hamaitzi. But if you crumbed up the entire thing, and there's no leftover of the lechem gadol, then he says, you make a bracha, mizaynis, you don't make any more the bracha of hamaitzi lechem and aretz. That's the conclusion of what Rav Yosef's opinion was.
So in other words, when he says pirurin, means that the pack actually comes. This is the kneidlach we're talking about.
No, it's not kneidlach. Kneidlach is a different story. One second.
Breadcrumbs, right?
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So what do? Do we make him as
just a second? Could we conclude the Gemara, please? Omar Rav Sheishes hat Rav Sheishes gesagt, Hai chavitza. This chavitza that Rav Yosef was talking about, Afal gav the less bei pirurin kazayis, although it does not have the size of a kazayis, mevarach olav hamaitzi lechem and aretz. You still make the bracha of hamaitzi lechem and aretz. Okay, so this is the conclusion over here that it says in the Gemara that even if it's smaller than a kazayis, you still make the bracha of hamaitzi lechem and aretz. I mean, this is the machlekes of Rav Yosef and Rav Sheishes, and the Alter Rebbe and the Seder Brachos and brings both opinions, and he says you should be machmer, even then it's smaller than a kazayis, you should still make the bracha of hamaitzi lechem and aretz. There's one more thing here. Omar Rave, v'hu de'ika le turisa denama. That's only if it has the shape of bread. If it has still if it looks like bread. If it has the appearance of bread. Even if it's smaller than a kazayis, but it has to have an original appearance of bread. If it lost its original appearance of bread, you don't make the bracha of hamaitzi. So therefore, a kneidlach is a different story. It doesn't have the appearance of bread. There's a big machlekes about kneidlach. Anyways, tonight kneidlach, the different ingredients you put into it will make the shaila even bigger, because you put into it different ingredients that take away the bracha of hamaitzi. Okay, but besides that, it doesn't have the shape of bread. The Mashal Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch that noodles, lakshin, Alter Rebbe says lakshin balaz, you don't make the bracha of amaitzi because it does not have the shape of bread. This concept of having the appearance of bread is a very important, maybe croutons, all kinds of things. Amaitzi croutons. Okay, so here's the thing, bekitzer. The Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch that when you have something that's put into water, bread that's cooked in water, and it loses its appearance of bread, or a dough that you never baked lechatchila, it was fried or cooked, and it never had the appearance of bread, you don't make the bracha of amaitzi. That's like noodles. It was never baked as a bread. Something, however, that was baked as bread, Alter Rebbe says, and it was not put into water, even if it's a tiny crumb that's as small as a little piece of flour, and you don't see the appearance of bread, but because it's the original bread and it wasn't cooked in water, over there you don't have to have the appearance of bread. You have to make the bracha of hamaitzi. So all these croutons, they have they're in their original state of the way they were bread. Elamai, you cut them up into small pieces, and some of them you can even see the appearance of bread. Even if you don't, the bracha still remains hamaitzi. This klal has only been negated either if it was never baked lechatchila, or if it was cooked in water and it lost its appearance of bread. And this concept of appearance of bread, the Gemara is going to continue now. It's negated to other things as well.
So croutons is
Hamaitzi.
Depends how it's made.
Okay, of course. We're not discussing ingredients now. If you put in apple juice or other stuff, is the
you get very often salads.
But schnitzel is always inside.
Okay, beseder. I'm talking now just about taking bread that's sliced up into small little sizes. The bracha remains hamaitzi. Now, if the ingredients is with apple juice or it's in a salad, we're not discussing that. But I'm just saying, bread as small as you just slice it into, even like a little speck of bread, the bracha remains hamaitzi. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Another thing that this Turisa the Name brings up now, other things regarding the bracha of hamaitzi. Treiknen. What's the bracha of treiknen? So first, actually, the Gemara starts with the mitzvah of challah. Chayavim b'challah. When you make this treiknen, you have to take off challah from it. Right? By challah, the Torah also uses the expression of lechem. So only if it's bread, if it's lechem, does the mitzvah of challah apply. So he said, treiknen p'turim min challah. They are pater of challah. It's not bread, it's not lechem. So the Gemara says, my treiknen. What is this treiknen? Amar Abaye kubedara. Treiknen is kubedara. The way it was then, in the oven, there was this cavity inside the floor of the oven, and they would pour a liquid batter of water and flour into this kubedara, into this cavity in the oven, and it would then bake and have a shape of bread. Or today we don't have it that way, but we just put it in these in these molds of these pans. So even though originally it was a liquid batter, but still, if after it bakes, it has the shape of a bread, so then it could be chayiv to make hamaitzi because it has the shape of bread. Going back to the klal we said before, if it has the shape of bread. V'amar Abaye says terisa. Terisa would be pater of challah, and you would not make a maitzi on it. My terisa, what is this terisa? So there's two opinions here. Ikkedamri, there are those that say gobel. Gobel is also again a batter where you mix flour and water, but it's not a regular dough, but it's still a liquid batter. Mirtach, and then you just take this soft batter and you pour it over the floor of the oven. And it never shapes into a challah. You just pour it and it, sort of like pancakes, I guess. Yeah, but pancakes have other ingredients in it. Here we're talking about just flour and water. Vikidamri, others say, name the hindike. It's bread the way it's made by hindike, the Indians, I think it is, something like that. So what they did was they would take the challah, the dough, and they would put it on a skew, and they would hold it in the oven like that and bake it in that way. It would never have the shape of challah. It was never baked in the proper shape of a challah.
Because it was flat properly.
Huh?
It was flat properly.
Sort of, yeah. Or I don't know what kind of shape it came out. They would like smear it with oil or with eggs, and that's how they would hold it on this skewer and bake it in the oven that way. Others say lechem ha'asi lekutach, bread that's made for this sauce that's called kutach. Kutach was an interesting mixture of some kind of a sauce that's mentioned in the Gemara very often, and it was made very often out of spoiled bread, or lechatchila they made bread which was very, very yeasty. wasn't regular bread, and that they would use it for this mixture of kutach to give it a sharp taste. So this lechem that's not regular bread, it's made for the kutach, Tanir Rab Chia, lechem asil kutach, this kind of a bread that's very yeasty, that's made for this mixture of kutach, patam nachala. It's exempt of challah, and you don't make the bracha of amaitzi. Frek the Gemara Vatanya, we learned in another brayso chayev b'challah that it is obligated in the mitzvah of challah. And for the Gemara, hasam kediktani taimer Rab Yehuda oime maaseh mechichan aleh. It depends how it's baked. It depends how it's made. Asam ka'ovin, if it's baked like loaves of bread, chayavin. Then you're obligated in challah, and you're obligated to make the bracha of amaitzi. Kilimudin, but if it's just baked like flat planks, so then Peturin. Then it's going to be potter because it doesn't have the shape of bread. Okay, stop over here. Continue tomorrow.
So what about